Assalamualaikum class. Hope so you are doing well. I'm doing well too. And I'm your instructor Asim. Hopefully you are doing great. Let's see what is our today's topic. So I'm going to discuss about a brief history of linguistics. Mainly our today's topic is development of modern linguistics. So we are going to talk about the development, how the modern linguistics has developed, and for that we have to study history of linguistics, as you know that. And let's see how it goes. So before the 19th century, language is a Western word was of interest mainly to philosophers. Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle, made major contribution to the study of language. For the 19th century, obviously, they were Greek who were in peak of their knowledge, and mainly all the linguistics and things, the theory have been dependent on them. And these are the things that we're going to study today. The modern field of linguistics dates from the beginning of the 19th century. And while ancient India and Greece had a remarkable grammatical tradition throughout most of history, linguistics and had been the province of philosophy, rhetorical and literary analysis to try to figure out how human language works. But in the 1786, an amazing discovery was made. Actually, this is happened in the 18th century, before the 19th century of Greece. In 1786, regarded as a birth date of linguistics, an Englishman such as William Jones pointed out that Sanskrit, the old Indian language, Greek, Latin, Celtic and Germanic all had striking structural similarities, and concluded that these languages must spring from one common source. This is an amazing discovery that have been take place. But in 1786, an amazing discovery was made. There are regular sound correspondences among many of these languages spoken in Europe, India and Persia. For example, the English F and sound often corresponds to the P sound in, among others, Latin and Sanskrit, an important ancient language of India. So there were a few words as well, like father in English and pater in Latin and pitar in Sanskrit, and full in English, Palinus in Latin, Parnas in Sanskrit. And another word, these are the words that are pretty much different pronunciation in different language in Latin, Sanskrit, but more or less their meanings are same. And in English, the word for in Latin it is called per, and in Sanskrit it is called paro. These are the differences actually. In the early 19th century, four best known scholars in the linguistic science of the early 19th century are Dan R. Rusk, and number 2 is J. Krem, and number 3 are F. Bob, and number 4 is von Humboldt. These are the renowned scholars in 19th century, basically in early 19th century, who contributed a lot for the linguistics. William von Humboldt. The Persian statements von Humboldt conceived a theory of inner and outer form in language, a Structural conception. Outer, the raw sound of the language. Inner, the pattern of grammar, meaning imposed upon the raw material and in differentiated languages. So it is a position statement that we both conceive a theory of inner and outer form in a language, a structural conception. Outer का मतलब होता है raw sound जो भी language से बाहर होता है. Inner the pattern of grammar, meaning imposed upon the raw material and in differentiated languages. So scholars realize that these correspondences found in thousands of words could not be due to chance of cultural influence. The only reliable conclusion was these languages are related to one another because they come from a common ancestors. Another idea of Humboldt is language as dynamic and activity, not the product of activity, not a set of actual utterances used by speakers, but the underlying principles or rules. These ideas influence or emerge again in Ferdinand de Saussure's structuralism and Noam Chomsky's transformational generative grammar. In much of 19th century, linguistics was devoted to working out the nature of this parent language, spoken about 6,000 years ago, as well as the changes by which Proto-Indo-European, as we know call it, developed into English, Russian, Hindi, and its other modern descendants. In the mid-19th century, Darwin published his famous Origin of Species, putting forward the theory of evolution. It seemed natural to attempt to chart the evolution of language alongside the evolution of species. Darwin was a great scholar. He published his famous book Origin of Species, putting forward this theory that evolution is mainly focused was on evolution. It seemed natural to attempt the chart of the evolution of language alongside the evolution of species. So this program of historical linguistics continues today. Linguistics has succeeded in grouping the 5,000 or so families, languages of the world into a number of languages, families sharing a common ancestors. So this is the main point of the Darwin actually. Modern linguistics. Here it is our today's topic actually, and now we are going to focus on modern linguistics. And obviously I had to go through the history of linguistics first in order to understand the modern linguistics. So here is today's topic that is commences right now. Modern linguistics emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries with a shift of focus from historical concerns and the change in languages over time. So to the idea that a language can be viewed as a self-contained and structured system situated at a particular point in time. In a modern linguistic emerged in the late 20th century. As you know that modern linguistics emerged in 19th century and early 20th century. There are so many changes have been made in that language. This forms this basis for structuralist linguistics. So structuralists have main concern or main contribution in that time, and at the beginning of the 20th century, attention shifted to the fact that not only language change but language structure has as always, as well, and systematic and governed by regular rules and principles. The attentions of the world's linguistics turned more and more to the study of grammar. In the 19th century, the emphasis shifted from language change to language description. So linguists began to concentrate on describing single language at one particular point in time in a static or synchronic study of a given state of the language. Their attention of the words, linguists turned more and more to the study of grammar in the technical sense of the term, the organization of the sound system in the language and the internal structure of its words and sentence. By the 1920s, the program of structural linguists, inspired in large part by the ideas of a Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, was developing sophisticated method of grammatical analysis. Ferdinand de Saussure, a Swiss scholar, born in 1857 and died in 1913, is labeled the father of modern linguistics. This period also saw transverse college study of language that had never been written down. It had by the become commonplace, for example, for an American linguist to spend several years working out the intricacies of the grammars of Chippewa or Ojibwa, Apache, Moaki, or some other indigenous language of North America. This is something new that Ferdinand de Saussure put forward. The student collected together his lecture notes after his death and published them under the title Course in Journal Linguistics, 1915. His crucial contribution was his explicit and reiterated statement that all language items are essentially interlinked. He suggested that language was like a game of chess, a system in which each item is denied by its relationship to all the others. So the last half century has seen a deepening of understanding of these rules and principles, and the growth of the widespread conviction that despite their seeming diversity, all the languages of the world are basically cut from the same cloth. As grammatical analysis has become deeper and we have found more fundamental commonalities among the language of the world. Structuralism. So that is very important, that can be given into your exams. So let's see what this structuralism is spoken about. Historically, de Saussure's ideas may be put under three ideas. He formalized and made explicit the fundamental and indispensable dimension of linguistics study: synchronic, descriptive linguistics, diachronic, historical linguistics. So the program that initiated by the linguistic Noam Chomsky in the 1957 sees this fact that as a consequence of the human brain being provided for particular properties of grammar, thereby drastically limiting the number of possible human language. The claims of this program have been the basis of the great deal of recent linguistics research, so have been one of the most important centers of contemporaries in the field, books and journal articles. Routinely present evidence for the against the idea that central properties of language are innate, which is synchronic and diachronic. Synchronic linguistics language are studied at a theoretic points in time. One describes a state of language disregarding whatever changes might be taking place. So here this point is very important. One describes a state of language disregarding whatever changes might be taking place, and diachronic is languages are studied from point of view of other point of their historical development. For example, the changes which have taken place between Old and Modern English could be described in phonological, grammatical, and semantic terms. So there are also a long tradition in the study of what it means to say that a word of sentence means a particular thing and how these meanings are conveyed when we communicate with each other. Two popular ideas about what meaning are go back to the ancient Greeks. On the meaning are mental representation of some sort of another is that the meaning of an expression is purely a function of how it is used. Both ideas have launched research programs that are active today. Diachronic and synchronic linguistics. Synchronic linguistics exploring contemporary use. Right? Contemporary use को explore कर रहे हैं diachronic studies में. Examining of linguistic phenomena or describing the language change over time, historical linguistics. So there is a slightest different. Synchronic में contemporary use को लेके चलते हैं and diachronic में examine the linguistic phenomena or describing the language change over the time. And next he distinguished linguistic competence of the speaker and actual phenomena or data of linguistics utterances as Lang and Perrault. So they have been joined by the third approach, building on work by philosophers such as Gottlob Frege and Bertrand Russell, which implies formal method derived from logic and attempts to adequate the meaning and expression with reference and the condition under which it might be judged to be true or false. Other linguists have been looking at the cognitive principles under the organization of meaning, including the basic metaphoric process that some claim to see at the heart of grammar, and still others have been examining the ways that sentences are tied together to form coherent discourse. Lang and Perrault. Lang, the language system shared by a community of speakers, French meaning language. It describes the social, impersonal phenomena of language as a system of signs, right? And whereas the Perrault is concerned, the concentrate and concrete act of speaking in actual situation by an individual speaker, meaning speech. It describes the individual personal phenomena of language as a series of speech acts made by a linguistic subject. Similar pairs of concepts have been developed by a number of theorists, such as line system code, language competence form, and parole use message verbal behavior performance function. So in the past 50 years, there has been increasing attention to the social side of the language as well as the mental, the subfield, and social linguistics has come of an age in part as a consequence of post-war World War II social movements and the national liberalism movement active in third world countries after the war post. The question of that would be their official language, their independence, and pressing question since almost all of them are multilingual. This led the scholarly study of the language situation in the countries of the world. In addition, the movement of the minority rights in the United States and their system countries has led to the close examination of the social variation that complements earlier work in the geographical variation. Scholars have turned the analytical tool of linguistics to the study of non-standard varieties of African American vernacular, English and Chicano Spanish, and the women's movement has led many linguists to investigate gender differences in speech and whether our language has to perpetuate sexually inequalities. His theory of signs has been very influential. His linguistic sign is a union of signify, the form sound, signified, the meaning function. Signify means a sound actually, that form, and signified the meaning function. This, the relationship of sound and meaning is arbitrary. Next is Prague School. The Prague School is a tradition of linguistic thought that is associated with group of uh, Czech and other linguistic circle of Prague, established in 1926. The group held regular meetings and published a journal. The primary interest of the circle was phonological theory. Hopefully, you are getting my point. Prague School continues here as well on this slide. Prague School phonology succeed in placing a notion of the phenomena of the center of linguistic theory as one of the most fundamental units. They also made contribution to the field of syntax. And next is phonetics and phonology. As you know, we have studied these topics before. Phonetics and phonology are dominant in early modern linguistics. The International Phonetics Association was established in 1886 by a group of European phoneticians. The British phonetician Henry Sweet was one of the leading figures in phonetics in the second half of the 19th century. Sweet and Polish linguist Courtney were independently instrumental in development of the notion of the phoneme or distinctive sound. Around the beginning of the 20th century in America, linguistics began as an offshoot of anthropology. Anthropologists were eager to record the culture of the fast-dying American Indian tribes, and the American Indian languages were one aspect of his. Uh, there were no firm guidelines for the linguists to follow when they attempted to describe exotic languages. Structural linguistics in America. Franz Boas, Edward Sapir, and Leonard Bloomfield, these were the scholars at that time of American linguistics. Franz Boas. Franz Boas is considered the founder of American linguistics and American anthropology. A major concern for him was to obtain information as Native American language as culture before they disappear. Very, very good point. Edward Safford was student was highly admired during his life and is still something of a hero to many linguists. He published extensively in both linguistics and anthropology, did first-hand field work on many American Indian languages, contributed to historical linguistics, and wrote theoretical works. And next is Bloomfield and American Structuralism. The state of affairs changed with the publication in 1933 of Leonard Bloomfield's comprehensive work entitled simply Language, which attempted to lay down rigorous procedures for the description of any language. Bloomfield's predominant concern was to establish linguistics purely as a science of language. And his main concern was to delimit the role of linguistics in relation to other sciences and to develop the principles of concept of linguistics into a well balanced and unified structure. Thank you very much. There are a few books that I want to suggest you if you want to read this topic. The फर्स्ट है हैरिस फ्रेंडी ए 1993 में लिखी गई, उसका नाम है द लिंग्विस्टिक्स वॉर, ऑक्सफोर्ड प्रेस में आपको मिल जाएगी. नेक्स्ट इज लेफ्शी गलेलियो सी 1972 में लिखी गई, जिसका है सर्वे ऑफ स्ट्रक्चरल लिंग्विस्टिक्स. और एक और बुक आपको मैं बताना चाहूँ जो लिखी थी फेडरिक जे ने 1986, द पॉलिटिक्स ऑफ लिंग्विस्टिक्स. Right, so these are the suggested readings that you can get from anywhere and study this topic. Thank you very much, class.